Good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome to the Bloody Disgusting Network. The passage of time will now bring you to something strange, unique, and idiosyncratic. Have a good time.
My friendship to all of you precludes my involvement with any one of you. But if you wanna make love, then I do too, and I'll be right there behind you. All in the name of oh, all in the name of oh, all in the name of oh.
Greetings, constant listeners, and welcome to the Bazaar, Caffrey's world of curiosities. What do I have for sale on my Turkish carpet today, laid out in front of my tent? Is it a lamp with a genie? No. Is it figurines? Is it Legos? No, it is short stories. I am selling short stories today. I didn't write them. They're by Stephen King, so I guess I stole them from him. I hope he's okay with that. I'm playing the role of the thief today. We are not writing these stories. We're not even giving them to you to absorb. You've probably already absorbed them if you're listening to this episode. No. We are going to rank them because that's what we do on our short story episodes here at the Losers Club, a Stephen King podcast. And of course, here we are with another short story collection by Cy King himself, The Bazaar of Bad Dreams, released. Well, it depends on what you consider released, but released as a collection November 13th, 2015. Of course, as King tends to do, includes a collection of pre-existing material published elsewhere, and then also some unpublished tales that we got for the first time back then. I am your host, or one of your hosts, Dan, the Little Green God of Caffrey, and I'm excited to plow through these today, rank all 20 of them, discuss them, analyze them, and give our feelings. But I'm not by myself here at the market, the flea market, the bazaar, whatever you want to call it. I'm here with three esteemed salespeople, jewelers. I don't know what you call salesmen or saleswomen, tinkerers, whatever it is, whatever the case, who is phoning in from Tennessee or is driven from Tennessee to be at my bazaar and sell analyses of these stories.
Hey, this is the bad little Jenn Adams. And yes, I am peddling my wares today because I have some opinions. Yeah.
And what was your first experience with the Bazaar of Bad Dreams?
I got the hardcover when it came out, and I read it right away. And I remember reading it. My kids were really young, so I've got like coloring marks in them and like drawings and stuff on some of the pages. But I have like vivid memories of reading this one, and it's one of the last ones that I read for the first time, like as it came out with my hands, like in an actual hardcover book too. So I have a good memory from that too.
Do they have an ebook or not ebook, an audiobook of the whole thing?
Yeah, and that's what I listened to this time. And it's a lot of different various readers. Like Will Patton makes an appearance, and I think Stephen King reads one, and Hope Davis reads one too. I can't remember everybody, but some good readers.
It's not Robin Williams doing his problematic salesman character from Aladdin.
It is not, but wow. What if he read all of like the Uncle Stevie stuff, you know?
In like an Arabian accent or whatever?
Yeah. Or we could get Will Smith to do it now, you know?
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah.
He's got some time.
I didn't see the remake. Does he play the yeah.
I didn't see it either, but yeah.
I see a Disney expert. Say who you are and answer that question.
Well, this is Michael Roffman is still alive, but sadly, Robin Williams wasn't when this book was released because he passed away in 2014. So let's just say if he had narrated any of the stories in this book, it would be from beyond the grave, which would certainly be scary in itself.
Or you might say the afterlife.
Yeah,
the afterlife.
Maybe his afterlife is just reading this audiobook over and over again. Or doing a problematic accent.
If the accent is problematic, that's a matter of morality.
Yeah, maybe this time he'll realize that it is a problem.
That is true, but I mean, he could have just been under the weather when he hit the mic, regardless of where he was. Let's just keep this going forever.
We do miss you, Robin Williams. I mean that sincerely.
Oh, absolutely.
Very sad. Yeah.
Our fellow loser, Justin Gerber, has a great post. I guess you wouldn't call it an obit, but it's an op-ed about his life right after he wrote it. And I remember editing it and crying.
Oh,
really?
Yeah. It's a really good. It's a great piece. So I think it's on Consequence. You can check it out.
I was in Uber last year in Florida, and the guy was talking to me about Robin Williams' stand-up because I actually don't know his stand-up super well. Mm-hmm. And he played me. It's a pretty well-known bit, but I had never heard it. Like in the Uber, he played me the joke about like Scottish people inventing golf, and I was like bursting, like just like almost crying. I was laughing so hard. So good stuff. Mike, what was your first experience reading Bazaar of Bad Dreams?
It was for this episode. This is one that
really?
it kind of fell off my radar. Well, for many reasons, but the ultimate reason being that we started this podcast in 2017. So I think by 2015, I was in like film critic mode, and I just wasn't reading a lot. And I think if I was reading, it was, probably memoirs or nonfiction. I think we were really big on like essays and stuff at the time. So this kind of just fell wayside. But I honestly remember seeing this in the bookstore and thinking it wasn't a short story collection. I thought it was like actually like he's got another creepy book out, Bazaar of Bad Dreams, interesting. And then I looked at the cover again on my softback that's from Scribner, and it's just funny that it just says like stories above the like they had to like maybe like be like, oh, actually, let's make sure that we acknowledge that there's stories there, but they're so small that like when you look at it in the bookstore, it could be like, oh, there's this cool story this cool novel called Bazaar of Bad Dreams, and it's like, oh, they're just a collection of stories. But you know me, I feel like I've been, with the exception of Nightmares and Dreamscapes, which I kick myself for not being on. I think I've been on every short story collection that we've done on this podcast because I love these collections. This is my favorite type of King. And I've got some thoughts on this one, but I did read it within 72 hours.
Oh, wow.
As Jen can attest to, I messaged her, I texted her on Thursday. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make this episode. I'm getting a little worried because
like I've got like 300 pages left.
I've got like 300. And so like, I just devoured it. I haven't been in that conundrum since Christine, but this was a smoother read than when I had to read 300 pages of Christine in 24 hours.
Even though there are a few in here that are technically considered novellas, there's no like The Mist, right? I think the longest story is Blockade Billy, maybe? I'm not sure.
Oh,
but
is it?
It's like Mile 81 is a little
81,
long.
yeah.
That or you are.
Your is pretty long too.
Yeah.
But nothing. Yeah, but you're right. They're nothing considered. Like I wouldn't even really consider them novellas, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, that's like pushing it.
Like this says Morality's a novella. I don't think so.
Yeah, no way. No.
But that's a hotly contested topic on the podcast about what's
and there's
considered
no way
a
to
novella.
know. There's no way to know it's a short story. No, it's a novella.
Exactly. Well, we have one more salesperson, hawker here on the Bazaar with us. Pfleegor, say hello, say who you are, and give us your first time reading this collection.
This is Dan, Mr. Yummy Pfleegor.
I knew you were going to do it.
I was going to do Bad Little Kid, but Jen got me on that one.
I stole it.
Yeah. So I got it when it first came out. My brother actually got it for me, and I just found the Christmas card inside where I try to put them in books whenever someone gives me a book. Mm-hmm. So this is my second time reading it, and I did this one a combination of the audiobook and the physical copy. So they had some cool narrators that varied by story on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, who was
Dylan Baker.
Who's like the MVP narrator for the ones
Dylan Baker, because I just watched Leroy, Texas, and he's great in that.
Which one did he read? Do you remember?
I have it somewhere in my notes. When it comes up, I'll
okay.
shout it out. But
so I remember that name, but I can't remember the story.
But it's funny because the cover looks a lot like Sleeping Beauty.
I was going to say that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
I had a similar experience thinking that it was not going to be a short story collection. Also, I guess Sleeping Beauties hadn't come out. Yeah, it may have come out by
similar.
the time I read this. I think.
Yeah.
I think they're both good covers. Like I like the color scheme. But I was doing a little research on it, and I just want to say a quote about short stories that King was talking to Good Morning America, and he said a short story is like a waltz with a stranger that you never see again. I think that's like kind of a cool,
so good
way to put this book, because there are some. I know this one's not as popular. Like even just reading our Discord, some people were like, "I hate this book," but I thought there were some good stories within it.
Yeah, I still put it above like Skeleton Crew, Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Like, it doesn't have The Mist, but I'd say most of these hit pretty well. There's a couple duds, but it's not like, it's definitely more of a grab bag, I think, than maybe Just After Sunset or Everything's Eventual, but it's still a really solid collection. I'll just say off the bat. Yeah, Mike.
This is so strange because I was thinking about this while making coffee this morning. That the proximity of our coverage for You Like It Darker to this is really, really bizarre. And I no pun intended. It's like Bizarre, not Bazaar. I just found it. I don't know if I've ever really done something like this where it's like because this is 2015, 2014, or 2024 for You Like It Darker. So it's 9 years separate. I read the 2024 book before the 2015 book, And it's just weird to see that, like, I'd argue, like, not to get ahead of, with final thoughts, but like, I guess it would be like what, like going, I don't know, the quality is different. It is a different, there's a different quality here. Cause I do think that there are some really, really strong stories here, but I don't think I don't think there's ever a single story in this that gets to the heights of You Like It Darker or Night Shift or even honestly, like Everything's Eventual and just after sunset. So I could see some of the criticisms that folks are saying in Discord, but I mean, overall, it's a very solid book, but I just thought it was so strange the way that, I mean, it's only been like 2 months since I've read You Like It Darker, maybe 3. And a lot of those stories were really fresh in my head. And even just from a thematic value, it's interesting to see, like, there's so many stories about mortality in this. Not morality, but mortality. And then you look at You Like It Darker, and it's just interesting to see what his perspective on life and mortality is in that book too. And so to read them that close together, it's like, I don't know, it's kind of it's almost like a fever dream. I can't explain it. It is just, it just hit me.
So I noticed in this one, every single story involves a death.
Yeah.
Which
Even
is
the
not
one
rare.
called A Death. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like not rare for Stephen King to have that, but I was like, oh yeah, every single story has a pronounced death in it, except for maybe the poems, but I'm pretty sure there's some in there too.
Yeah.
I mean, Tommy is literally a funeral.
And the
So
Bone
it's
Church
like-
is about, essentially a graveyard, an elephant graveyard, Yeah, it's interesting if you... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go first, Jen.
Like, if I look at this one and You Like It Darker, it almost feels like bookends to this
Yes.
phase that I feel like is him figuring out mortality. Because here it's like, okay, yes, death is a part of life. Death is going to happen. Death is very mundane. And with Bazaar of Bad Dreams, it's like, okay, yeah, so death is going to happen. And I've worked through a lot of my feelings. And I feel like If It Bleeds is kind of the peak of that, or in the midpoint. And then here it's like, okay, so what's next? Now that I've accepted I'm going to die relatively soon, what else do I have to do with my life? You know what I mean?
It's also telling to see kind of different mediums that he takes up for his own storytelling vessel. Like, I was thinking about like the similarity between like Mr. Harrigan's Phone and even Obits, and even something like Everything's Eventual, like the link between them. It's just like he does have these common I guess vessels for storytelling, or like common, not themes because they're not themes per se, but just like engines, I would say. Yeah, there's common engines that they go through. And it's interesting how he's been able to like kind of pour his own anxieties at the time into those engines and what they mean. Because we'll talk about it with the with those stories individually here, but it's just having read so many of these short story collections so near each other, because Just After Sunset was just last year. So and then we also did Full Dark No Stars last year. So it's just like having a lot of these novellas, short stories all in one vacuum, and it spans the breadth of 15, 17 years. You really do get a strong portrait of him just through these books. And almost more so than I would say even his novellas, because I feel like with his novellas, he's really just sitting with a lot of this stuff. Whereas like these, as he says in the intro of this book, or even through the many intros of his short stories, that he would knock these out at a given moment. And those feel like portraits of where his mind was at the time. And so when you read these collectively, I don't know, I mean, maybe it's just me playing armchair psychiatrist as I always do on the show, but like I do feel like I know Mr. King a little bit more after reading all of them together.
I mean, and he says this just as much in the intro and even in the jacket description. I agree with what you guys said about death for sure. And even though he's older in both this and You Like It Darker, there's a difference between writing about death in your 60s and in your 70s, right?
Yep.
There's more resignation, I think, in You Like It Darker, whereas Bazaar of Bad Dreams to me feels like a crossroads. Even when he's not dealing with death, there's a lot of like hardcore decision making in these stories, and how can I reconcile, which is different than resignation, like, okay, what approach am I going to take to this challenge in my life? So I'm very excited to talk about this. And similarly, I read this when it came out, I remember, but definitely a different experience reading it so close to You Like It Darker. Jen, I know you pulled some reviews from when this came out, and it's always interesting talking about this because his collections do feel pretty cohesive to me, even in this one where it is a little bit grab baggier than You Like It Darker. But then I always have to remember, like, oh, these were all written like in different times from different sources, but they all feel like they were written in one sitting to me, if that makes sense. But yeah, Jen, I don't know if the reviews talk about that, but what was the general reception when this came out?
I was surprised to find a lot of really positive reviews on this, and I think that's probably coming from my own perception. Like when I read this, like I said, I had really young kids, and I was very much in my I can't read Pet Sematary mode right then. And I think I found a lot of the stories like really confronting and really hard to like engage with. And so I just had kind of come out of this being like, this is my least favorite collection. I'm not super into it. There are some high points. But I think now that I've had a lot of distance, I've really enjoyed it a lot more. And that seems to be the consensus of critics. I didn't find a ton of reviews, but I found one from The Guardian really praising his mastery of the novella. With its killer cars and visions of death foretold, this collection of short works recycles familiar themes, but it also reveals King's mastery of the novella. Stephen King has shown a remarkable knack for making the novella seem like the platonic ideal of fiction, which I thought was funny. Specifically talking about You Are, the 57 spellbinding pages of You are the highlight of a less than vintage collection. One wonders what Amazon was hoping for in the way of product placement when they approached King to write an e-format story to promote the second version of the Kindle. What they got was a startling jack-in-the-box of a tale in which a literature teacher's freshly delivered reading device provides a portal into a multiverse of written words, including new masterpieces from Hemingway and Poe. As with his evil clowns, down drains, or possessed automobiles, a ludicrous premise is turned into an insinuatingly believable story thanks to King's true superpower, suspending our disbelief by dint of a 360-degree field of brilliant HD detail. I also crack up when it says, when they approached King, pictured, as if nobody knows what Stephen King looks like, 'cause he's got a picture in the article. And then I found one from the LA Times. The Bazaar of Bad Dreams illustrates this formulation neatly, since the sharpest work here is that approaching novella length. Long stories such as You Are, originally written as a promotion for Amazon's Kindle, or Obits, echo with depth and drama, fleshed out with character details, three-dimensional setups, the landscapes of a fully realized world. This sense of catharsis, an epiphany even, occupies the center of much of King's fiction. I found one more from Den of Geek, which I am a huge fan of that site. It's got a lot of really interesting analysis. The Bazaar of Bad Dreams might be Stephen King at his most literary. Not that the distinction should really matter. Whether it's horror, sci-fi, fantasy, or he's telling it to you straight, King is a master of the short form, and his latest collection is just the cherry on top. You'll see in Bazaar of Bad Dreams that the voices can change from one story to the next, but the dread is all King. That comes naturally. And they're emotionally taxing too. At several points while reading these stories, I had to put the book down because I was terrified, not due to the monster under the bed, although there's still plenty of that. Mile 81 is particularly good, but the very real tragedies that weave their way through the book, whether in life or death. It's interesting, too, King's view on death, where in the past, deaths in his stories were always somehow special, whether because they meant something or were particularly gruesome. In these stories, death is just a thing that happens. Each story begins with a little introduction about how King came up with the idea, the process of writing the story, and what he thinks of the finished product. These little interludes offer a unique look into the writer's mind, but not in a pretentious way.
I'd agree with that, yeah. I actually, what was the first book he started doing those intros? It was Everything's Eventual, I think.
No, I know he did it for Skeleton Crew.
Yeah.
Oh, he did with Skeleton Crew.
I'm trying to remember if he did it for Skeleton Crew is my favorite collection. I think. I can't remember if he did it for the hand one, Night Shift.
Well, it's hard to say because so many of these have been reissued and re-released. So it's like, I mean, did they? I'm sure if we asked Bryant Burnett,
yes,
he would probably know in a second. But
you call him on the Bryant phone.
Yeah, the little
get him on the horn.
I love the little interludes though, like the Dear Constant Reader. So it was kind of just fun to see like what was on his mind when he was writing these things, and like some of the thoughts you're like, oh, this seems very disconnected, but he always brought it back to the inspiration for the story. I also like too having all the different dedications.
Yes,
there are a few that stood out.
Even when half of them are to Raymond Carver.
Yeah, sometimes you can sometimes he explains why it's dedicated to that person, but then other times he'll just be like, oh, for Stuart Onan. Although it was Blockade Billy dedicated to Stuart Onan? I can't remember.
No, I don't know, but that's the Stuart Onan. Yeah, that's the Face in the Crowd.
Face in the Crowd.
Yeah, I need to read Face in the Crowd actually. And actually, Pfleegor, just because I know you've read it, there's one story that was only included in the softback versions or the e-reader versions, Cookie Jar, which I did not read, but you read it.
Yeah, it's sort of a, what is it, like similar to like Bearskin, where like the constant money, but it's a cookie jar basically that a mother has for her children, but every time they turn it upside down, there'll be cookies inside, and even years later, it sort of passes on with these cookies. So it's I thought it was pretty good actually. Like I wish it was in the hardcover edition, but
was it more like a sentimental story?
Probably one of the more sentimental of this collection for sure.
Yeah.
But still had a little bit, the underlying terror and horror to it. But
Yeah.
Hey, a jar that gives cookies. I guess that would be scary to me.
It's not going to be scary to you.
I would get
I was
diabetes
surprised. I was surprised Cookies Caffrey himself didn't read this one.
I know.
So.
Well,
Yeah.
I know what I'll be doing right when I end this.
Eating a cookie. No,
eating
it's like not reading it at all.
I eat cookies all the time. Well, we will not be ranking Cookie Jar today, but we will be ranking the 20 main stories that are in the first edition. And I said this off mic. Our rankings were wildly different for most of these stories. Some of them, they're kind of the same. Some of them on the very low end, we all ranked pretty consistently. But like, no joke, I'll spoil it here. My number 1, and I think Mike's number 3, were Pfleegor and Jenn's like 19th and 18th.
Oh my God,
I couldn't believe it.
yeah.
So I'm excited to get to some of these.
Some adults
and
in the
have you
room.
all
That's great.
explain
Yeah.
yourselves. This shit.
Yeah, I was curious. So it sounds like there wasn't really a man out of the 4 of us. It was just really, we kind of approached them and experienced them differently. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I think experiencing is a good way of putting it, because depending on when you read these, it can definitely affect you. Because part of that Good Morning America interview that I watched before this recording, he talks about how his stories are like time capsules that you read them during the day, but they get you at night.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like that's particularly here in this collection.
Totally. And I should say too, the one I ranked as number 1, I remembered it from way back in the day. So I'm like, it was just sticking with me. I kind of knew it was going to be my number 1. So, well, let's get right to it then. We got some stories to rank. We got 20 of them. So, I'm trying to think of some king phrase to equate. Time is a wasting. It's like some Dark Tower thing. but I can't
Cause
think
a
of it.
wheel.
Cause a wheel.
Let's
So we gotta
knock off the
rush.
first one so we can get to 19.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get this first one out of the way, and we'll be at 19. I'm a little over the 19 references now. I'm just like,
Oh, especially even if this one. It's
Cliche,
just like in
yeah.
every
Yeah.
fucking story.
there's a number. There's 19. Okay, well, we're not 19. We are at number 20, and technically not a short story at all. This is a poem/eulogy called Tommy. And before we get into it, I want to preface, I did rank the poems pretty low, but they're short and they're interesting. So it wasn't like this story dedication to me from Nightmares and Dreamscapes where I'm like, oh God, give me a break. Like, I think even the lows here, I wouldn't call them full on pieces of shit or something like that.
Yeah.
But
There's nothing bad in this collection.
This was one we all had ranked fairly low, I think between like 16 and 19. Roffman, you said that you were a little bit fond of it.
Yeah, I think this one actually hit a little harder for me. I mean, not to say that I think I ranked it number 17 for me. So it's not, like I was like, oh my God, one of his best. But just after reading this whole book where he's meditating on mortality, after reading Hearts in Atlantis and kind of just in Hearts in Suspension especially, which I believe we have an archives episode on those if you want to listen to that. Mm-hmm. It's all about his college life. And so much of those books are about, these dreams that they held for a future that never came. And I just think this poem, over all the rest of the poems I've read by him, just really hit in a way that was like, oh, he's speaking really personally here. And just the idea of all these people that died with their beliefs and they never were changed or, they never were jeopardized by any sort of temptations and, just cauterized by even just the way that our world evolved. There's something really powerful about it. And I think that those last few lines that he has, which is, I'll read it real quick. Just like, these are the soldiers of love who never sold insurance. These are the fashion dudes who never went out of fashion. Sometimes at night, I think of hippies asleep in the earth. Here's to Tommy, drink to the motherfucker. Like, it's really blunt, but it's like, I think it's really effective. And I think about it all the time with people who die young and the idea that they're forever ensconced as that person. And there's something also powerful about it. I think that's maybe why, like growing up, I was always obsessed with maybe dying young, because I don't want to be, I don't want to be a fraud of who I believed in. and which I think inevitably happens as you get older. And it's like the whole joke that's like, oh, you're a Democrat when you're younger and you're a Republican when you're older. I mean, I don't think that'll ever happen because the Republican Party is a fucking shit show now, but like even more so than ever. But
talk about bizarre, am I right?
Yeah. Bizarre, probably weird. You know what I mean? Weird. This JD Vance guy, he's weird. But yeah. So anyway, those sentiments I think really came through in this, and I didn't feel like he was trying to do anything other than get something out emotionally, purge an emotion of his, and I felt it, Stephen. So that's where I put it a little higher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. For me, I didn't rank this low because of the subject matter. I think he speaks to hippiedom and Vietnam and all of those topics very in the 60s in general, very eloquently throughout all of his work. I think for me, it's just I hate to say this, I just don't think he's much of a poet. It's like I just would rather see this in prose or fiction. I feel that way with just most of the poems he writes, with the exception of some of the shorter verses we get in The Dark Tower. So that's why it was low for me. Like, I like the sentiment and I agree with all that. And that was very beautifully said, Mike. But yeah, I just ranked it low because like the poetry just doesn't hit me. But Jen, what about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think, and he admits as such, he's like, I don't think I'm the greatest poet. That's why I don't publish too many of them. And I am not particularly fond of poetry. I don't think it's bad. It's just not something that ever really resonates with me.
I always feel like I don't get it. Like,
exactly.
I feel like I'm a fool when I analyze it. Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not getting what is between these lines. I'm not picking it up. And I also just think his narrative fiction is so great that I'm like, that's what I want. What I do think is interesting about this is, I kept thinking about like what I'm going to be buried in, like this concept of being buried in your tie-dye shirt. I was like, that's a part of death that I think we don't really think about too much until you start looking at your own and you start thinking, well, what do I want to be buried in? Because that's like what your body is eternally going to be ensconced in, and like what piece of your life do you want to carry into the afterlife. And I just started thinking about that and like kind of spiraling on it, and I think it's a really interesting idea in this collection. And also, if we're talking about like his ideas about death, Mike, we're talking about like dying young. And I think in some of his other novels, like especially Christine is coming to mind, he talks about how like as you get older, like part of you dies, and it's like the death of your ideals dies. And like Tommy is forever going to be this young kid. He's going to, and it makes me think like River Phoenix too, you know?
100%. That's who I went to. Yeah.
Pfleegor, what about you? You actually had this ranked the highest, and by highest I mean like 16, so not super high. But what were your thoughts
Number
on
one.
Tommy?
No, I actually, because I do read a lot of poetry, but he mentions in A Bone Church that these poems are meant to be enjoyed, not deconstructed. And I kind of disagree with that, though, because I do think you need to have some kind of deconstruction with poetry to get a context going. But I think these almost feel like more free writing exercise. You know what I mean? Like, I think he's just pouring emotions on the page, less concerned with the poetic quality to them and more just kind of dumping, it's like you get a bucket on your head and you just kind of dump it on the page. I found them a little weird to have multiple poems in this short story collection, but I don't mind, the little bit of a change up. But yeah, I couldn't make a ton of, beyond just like the emotion there. I couldn't analyze this to a great conclusion.
It's funny, I'm reading a collection by Jack Ketchum right now called Closing Time that's also very good, and he talks about Stephen King a bit in that because King was always a champion of him when he was alive. And he too he doesn't have poems so far, but he has like an erotic story he wrote for a men's magazine and like a monologue that was in a play. And yeah, I'm always back and forth on it because on one hand I'm like, just give me your stories, but also the stories in here are so short that I'm like, I kind of like that they're there, right? I want it to be collected somewhere because King's my favorite author. So, yeah, none of our favorite, it looks like, but glad, as Sam Elliott says in Big Lebowski, I'm glad he's out there. And by he, I mean Tommy, the poem.
It's funny because I was going to say Elliott Smith. It reminded me of A Fond Farewell to a Friend.
Yeah.
This poem.
Yeah.
I never got into Elliott Smith. I feel like I need to, though.
Missing out.
I remember when I talked to oh yeah, we used to talk about him and you were like, fuck that loser.
Yeah.
I'm just joking.
I remember saying that on the eve of his suicide. I was like, enough. I'm just kidding.
Enough of him.
Very tragic. Hey, Robin Williams connection. Good Will Hunting. Am I right?
Yeah, that's true.
Also, I should say this saying in this, if you remember the 60s, you weren't there. that saying, I don't know who said that originally, but it's been attributed to Robin Williams, although I'm sure he wasn't the first person who said it. So,
and Dennis Hopper, but Dennis Hopper takes a lot from other people I've been finding out lately. So
yeah, Hopper, what a fucking loser. No, I'm kidding. I'm just gonna call everyone a loser. Yeah,
he's a madman.
Is Dennis Hopper, do you think, the influence for Bertram from The Sandlot? You know, he just got really into the 60s and no one ever saw him again. Because, like, you read about, like, Apocalypse Now, and he would just, like, vanish on set, and they're like, where the hell did he go? And then he'd just come back randomly. And
I always thought that line in The Sandlot was such a cop-out, but it does make sense thinking
it's
about
the thing that
like,
I
the
think
60s.
about more than anything.
Like, where did this
now.
guy actually go? Isn't there a
that-
sequel?
Probably. I'm sure. Like, it's Bertram comes back and he just has like 4 kids and has a fucking loser job. But
I always felt like they were doing him dirty narratively. But
there's a mystery to it. Like the mystery of Tommy.
We're not out of poetry land just yet. Number 19.
Oh, King's Dominion.
Clock that down. King's Dominion is The Bone Church. It's the other poem in this book. As Jen said, kind of a bar story about a guy recollecting seeing an elephant graveyard and seeing the ghosts of elephants or mammoths run off this cliff like lemmings. Similarly for me, I actually like this imagistically. I like what he's going for here. I just think it would have been better as like a yarn in a Dark Tower book than as a poem. It just feels a little inessential. But Jen, what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this one, I think I had this listed at 19 on my list. And again, it's just the poetry. 19, just the poetry thing. It's just not my favorite. And I think the reader kind of, for me, soured me a little bit because he very much read it in like the dialect. And he was like, and the elephants, see? And it was Cotter Smith. I found a list of all the readers. But yeah, and it's not that he did a bad job. It's just, it wasn't a story that I think I was particularly pulled in by, and so to have it like really kind of dramatized in that way, I think I was like, okay, even though I do think it's a cool image, and it of course reminded me of the Lion King when they go into the elephant graveyard.
The actual elephant's graveyard, which I found out elephant's graveyard's not a thing in real life.
Oh no. Well, hey, at
they
least
do have
King gave
funerals.
us one.
Elephants will do funerals, but they're no graveyard.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So Babar's mom is just fucking in a creek.
Babar.
She's not.
Oh, she's a queen.
Pfleegor.
We should mention though he talks about in the intro a little bit of how this was inspired by free verse in the 1960s, connecting it to Robert Browning's "Child Roll into the Dark Tower Came," which me and Dan did a whole episode where we just analyzed that entire poem line by line.
Yeah.
But again, I do feel like this is just kind of like a free writing experiment. I don't know that there's a whole lot.
Pfleegor, I was wondering this. Do you feel like this was supposed to be in Midworld? It had Dark Tower vibes to me a little bit.
There was a little bit of weirdness to it, and I think it was at it's like I was reading about the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. It has like kind of this older style of, I don't know, sentence construction, but
it's like a shanty. Like,
yeah,
but I still couldn't get a ton out of it. So your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's
Roffman,
why I didn't
what about,
like it, because it feels like Midworld. I'm like,
oh yeah, because you were not a
not a
tower.
Dark Tower
Neither
person.
you're Mike or Tower heads, but Mike's not a Tower head, but he had this at 19.
I did. Well, I thought I did get some King's Dominion from it through the Dark Tower, so I was like, well, how fitting to put it at 19. No, that was just a serendipity.
Stupid, yeah.
But no, just what Jen said. It's one of those things where it's like it's hard to kind of find steadier footing here. I don't really know what's kind of being discussed at times, and it just kind of feels a little loosey-goosey. This is the type of poetry I tend to not like, which is whenever I'm like, I guess it's not to sound like a Luddite, but like when I have to like think too hard on different standards, I'm like, all right, like I'm moving on. So that's kind of where I was at with it, and it's a cool name though. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the bone from was it Lion King I just watched recently? The Bone Graveyard.
There are bone churches in Scandinavian countries called
Osieries, I've been to a few. I've been in Vienna and Prague. They have it's kind of eerie, but you go into this like crypt and it's like chandeliers made out of bones.
Did you see any ghost mammoths or not?
It was weird taking pictures of it and just seeing how many like lives were accumulating there, but no ghost mammoths.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say I did go to a bone church in Milwaukee in middle of July. It was called the Republican National Convention.
Oh man.
Anyway.
That's good. Well, hey,
So dumb.
speaking of that kind of behavior, let's go on to number 18. This is drunken fireworks. A little bit of an anomaly in King stories in that it's kind of a straightforward comedy. It's interesting because in the intro, it's these two feuding families fighting over fireworks shows and one displays that they do across the lake from each other, and one of the displays gets out of hand and leads to some destruction, but has a somewhat happy ending. And it was funny because in the intro, King talks about how he doesn't want it to be looked at as like a local color story, but it's totally a local color story. It's like Maine yokels.
Yes.
It felt like fucking Little Abner filtered through Stephen King. I mean, I was tickled by it a little bit, but by the end, I'm like, okay, I don't know if I need all this like Pappy Yoakum speak, even though there were some funny one-liners in this. But yeah, Mike, where do you stand on this one? I think you had it.
It's 100% what you were saying. I'm glad he was very self-effacing about it and pretty transparent in the beginning, but it's like, I don't know. It just felt very repetitive too, where I'm like, oh, we're doing another year. Fuck. Like, can't they get this figured out? And then the ending was just very like, I don't know. It was all right. Like, I don't also know if that would work with the insurance claims.
I was expecting there to be more death. Like, I thought it was getting really dark, and it kind of just wrapped up nicely. Wait, I
kind of wish
like
it did, but
a funny curveball for him, I guess. But more of like a curiosity to me than like a hard hitting story.
It's just weird because I guess I was trying to figure out why have I heard this story so many times, and I feel like it's because one of you put it on the summer list because I think that makes sense because it is a very summery story.
Yeah.
But I guess I had to quote Pink Floyd, high hopes for this one, and let's just say it didn't match them at all because I like fireworks. I was a bad little kid growing up, and so I thought there was going to be something like, I don't know, the mother is like going to light it and then she blows up on the deck or something like that, and I was like, oh, that could be kind of cool. I mean, I sound like I sound literally like Teddy in the body and Stand By Me, like being like, it's a good story but bad ending or whatever. Like I kind of wanted some like miserable destructive ending or something.
What does Teddy say? Like, oh, he should have joined the Merchant Marines.
Yeah, or they blew his dad away or something like that. It's like, it's really telling about his own psychology, but it's just very like he wants a really dark ending, and I kind of wanted that here. I just wanted some, but you're right, it is a good curveball. I would give it that. I'll give it that for sure.
Yeah. Pfleegor, what about you? Because I know you and I both liked fireworks as a kid. You got away with it more because I had a sister who used to rat me out.
Yeah, rat me out on occasions.
She
too.
one time, the man she's now married to, who's like Pfleegor and mine's other best friend, him and I were setting up fireworks on the trail behind her house, and she came and found us, and we lied. We're like, no, we were just peeing. Like, we were just peeing, I swear. So yeah, Pfleegor got away with more pyromania than I did. What were your thoughts on this story?
But it's definitely something you outgrow. And the thing firework competitions are so silly because like you could just sit and enjoy the other people blowing their money on fireworks, and enjoy the show. You don't have to compete. And especially I think living in Chicago where every weekend is just like a ton of fireworks going off. Like even the other night, there's just at 2 a.m, somebody lit off like a box of Saturn rockets. So I'm kind
summer
of
also because like the winters are so
but especially we've had like holidays and whatnot. But the only firework competition that I really like is from Coneheads when Eldar lights the firework and then it creates like a vortex cigar. That one.
Hey,
I think this was this the final story in the collection?
No,
Summer Thunder.
This was actually
it's Drunken Fireworks, then Summer Thunder, which have very similar titles.
Yeah, I think those are kind of strange ones to end it on. Like I do think the front half of this collection, at least in my opinion, was stacked compared to the latter stories. But
well, remember that later. We may have some fighting words about that. Well, it's a firework fight about that. Jen, what about you? You actually not super high, but you had this at 13, which was higher than all of us. What were your thoughts on this story?
Well, I feel like I am maybe responsible for overhyping this one because I think like this is one of the ones that I remembered after reading it the first time. Like I really enjoyed it. I remember like laughing out loud in certain sections. And now that I think back about like the mindset I was in when I read this, I think I was just so kind of relieved to have a happy story, because these are like really sneaky, like fuck you up stories. And I think this one just feels kind of happy. But this time, like it hit a little bit different. And I think it was the local color that I was just not super into. Also, the narrator like really leans into the Maine accent, and I had a hard time understanding him sometimes. He like brings a lot of life to it. But what I think is interesting, like I do live on a street where we have kind of firework battles, like we've got neighbors on either side that are kind of feuding. And so on either side of our streets, they'll be setting up their little things, and everybody's kind of precious about their bombers, that they put the fireworks in. And Corey and I are like, okay, well, we'll just go over to wherever the house is and help them and not spend our money. But my neighbor even has a trumpet that he plays on the 4th of July too. So I was like, oh shit, is this on my street? But yeah, I like this one. It just like, it didn't really have the resonance that I remembered the last time I read it. And I was like, okay, this is fine. But for me, it wasn't necessarily about where I was placing it. It was that there were so many others that I placed above it that it just kind of kept bumping it down,
Yeah, that's how this collection gets at a certain point. Like, I think as we share individual opinions, once I'm not going to have like a lot of negativity about some of these stories once we're in the upper echelon, because but I did have a negative opinion about this one, so that's what I'll say.
Yeah, my notes just say meh.
Great criticism.
Like the trumpet.
No, I know, but it's the shortest ones I have of any. Just
The trumpet thing is pretty funny. I'll give it that. Like that's a great motif, and it was a very visual motif for. I mean, even though it's a sound, but I could just see some asshole like on the dock,
like Christopher,
God, that fucking asshole.
we did have a guy. It wasn't a rival fireworks presentation, but on Mike, the guy I just mentioned, his street every year did a big 4th of July, celebration. And one of the dads I remember, and it wasn't in opposition to anything, he would like very drunkenly roll this firework cart and like light it with them all with a blowtorch. It felt like the trumpet was kind of like that for me. Well, hey, the summer fun continues. We talked about The Sandlot. We talked about Stuart Onan. Our next story is baseball themed. It's a novella. It is called Blockade Billy at number 17. And I should say, all of these so far were pre-published works, including this one. Roffman and I had this at dead last, which because here's my thing with this. This came out as a novella beforehand, and I was like, whoa, cool. I'm so excited to read. I remember reading it and being like, why is this on its own? Like, nothing happens in this. It's just, it's baseball. This creepy guy who killed his foster family smuggles a razor, but doesn't really do much damage. And that's kind of it. It's almost like you find out the backstory without any actual story after it. It just feels like such a non-starter to me. But Mike, do you have similar feelings?
Yeah, it's the same way. I mean, I know it ends with like a death, but I don't know. It felt, for me, it was a little too inside baseball, pun intended.
Wow. Literally.
We need a trumpet for this episode.
Yeah, seriously, it's just too many puns. But yeah, I love anyone who could write with authority on things. It's always fascinating to me. It's why I actually really like a lot of sports books. Dream Team book is incredible. Go check it out. But I don't know. This just got too bogged down in the details. Like for me, it's
bogged down.
Way bogged down. Yeah. For me, it was just, I didn't care about the games as much. I was more interested in the characters, and it felt like this was so interested in getting and nailing down like all the sayings and the sort of actions of baseball. And it's just not very interesting when you're reading it versus seeing it. I mean, some of my favorite sports movies are baseball related. Like Major League is one of my favorite movies of all time, but it doesn't mean I need a novelization. I mean, if I got a novelization of Major League, it would probably be more about the stuff that was happening behind the scenes. And that's just not really the case here. Like so much of it is just action. And I felt I wanted more of like, what's happening in the dugout? What's happening, beyond the baseball games? And I just didn't feel like we got enough of it for me to be that interested. Like I actually ended up, like I was kind of like floating through this, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah,
it's interesting because I read that baseball book Faithful that he wrote with Stuart, and I actually liked it quite a bit. I didn't understand all of it because I'm not a huge baseball fan, but I'm like, okay, the passion radiates. I'm interested in what these guys have to say about the sport, and I was for this too. But it was almost like he couldn't meld the crime horror element successfully for me. It was strange because I was like, okay, cool, razor blade between his fingers. He does one thing with it, and that's kind of it. Like, that's what I mean when it's like we find out the reveal is like, oh, here's who this guy is, and now he's in prison, and we're good. Yep. Nothing in the future happens. I did like the device of talking to Mr. King as a sports reporter.
That's what I have.
Pfleegor, what do you think? You had it a little bit higher than
I mean, bloated Billy, I guess is a better term. It did take a while to get going, and I like the device of he's like, Mr. King, and he's like, telling him this story, but then it took forever to get going. And then once it did, it kept going. I like the idea of the fans chanting like "kill the ump" and having an impact on the player, just like the peer pressure. But yeah, this one, another one. I mean, it's perfect for a collection like this because it's sort of a non-starter for me. But yeah, I mean, there's some fun elements to it, I guess. It just didn't wow me. And I was kind of like with Mike, I was kind of floating through it and almost being like, all right, let's move on to the next story here. All
right. Now here's where the real outliers start to begin. Jen, you had this at number 8, I believe.
I did, yeah.
My favorite number, personally. It's my 19. Yeah. So 2 questions for you. First, defend yourself.
How dare you?
And also, being someone who enjoyed this story more, why do you think it got its own hardcover publication before this?
I think, okay, well, let me answer that one first. I think it got its own publication because it does feel really singular, and it is a longer one, so I think it's got the length to establish that publication. And I mean, listening to y'all, maybe that length is kind of a detriment to it. It didn't really bother me. I also think it's a really easy package, too. Like, there's a lot of visuals that you could put with it. I'm seeing the cover very clearly, and it would be perfect to release in baseball season. It's kind of like, and King is such, a baseball fan too, that I think the marketing kind of made this a really easy one to put out on its own. And I think what I really enjoyed about it is, I'm not a huge baseball fan, but I have really enjoyed Head Down and Faithful and A Face in the Crowd. I was really not expecting to like Faithful at all. I was kind of dreading it, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I think part of it is, I'm not a huge baseball fan, but Corey is, my husband, and he played vintage baseball for a while too, like the old-timey stuff where they don't have the gloves. And I really like the romance of baseball, but it's something that is hard for me to really experience for myself. Like, I just really wish I could care enough to watch an entire major league game, but I just don't. It's too boring for me. But I find the way King writes about it, because he really loves it, and I can feel that passion coming through when he writes about it. I loved kind of the baseball lingo vibe to it. You can tell that they really know what they're talking about, and it's like they're almost speaking the baseball language, which I found like really kind of intoxicating. And I wonder if listening to it helped that too, because there's like a first person narrative, like kind of like how Dolores Claiborne I think works really well as an audiobook, because it's someone telling a story. And then we get this nasty shit at the end that I really liked. This idea of somebody swallowing a bar of soap, I think is so creepy.
Which happens in obits too, interestingly enough. I don't know if that was intentional, but I was like, ooh, that's a very disturbing detail to put in 2 stories.
And it's so funny because I've talked about in other episodes, like, where is the other time where somebody swallows a bar of soap? Because I know it's happened in 2 of his stories, and it's in both of these. I was like, I wonder what he saw that like inspired that, because I would never think to die by suicide that way.
I don't know if it's like the wash your mouth out with soap, but like taking that to an extreme
taking
level.
It too far, yeah.
That sounds awful though. Yeah. Real nasty. But hey, I appreciate your defense of the story.
Oh, thank you.
We have a balanced argument going on. It's just going to continue with this next story.
Uh-oh.
Number 16, Mr. Yummy. Pfleegor, you had this at dead last. What did you hate about it?
Oh, I just could not get going on this one. I almost have to remind myself. So it was about older man, right, in retirement home, having the fantasy about the younger man. The only notes that I really took was that several of these stories take place in retirement homes, which is interesting because it's like King confronting his own mortality, especially as he's been spending more time in Florida. There's retirement homes everywhere. So that was the only thing I really took out of this, was just like, okay, he's clearly thinking about this a lot. But this is another one that just never really grabbed me. And it just, I don't know. It was like an odd subject matter too. So...
Well, I don't want to speak with any kind of authority on this because I am not a gay man, but I'll say my overall thoughts on the story. But I do think something to consider. Robin's laughing. So I'm not, guys. I'm not gay.
No. I'm not a gay man, but yeah.
No, but like, because he even kind of couches it in the intro. He says, "Oh, I know," because this is a previously unpublished story. This is the first previously unpublished one we're discussing. He was saying like, oh, I don't believe in the write what you know adage, because that limits our understanding of each other, which I agree with. Like, I do 100%. Think as a writer, if the point is to have empathy and show other sides, I do think you should explore voices that are not your own. I do think it requires a certain amount of research and thought, because you can certainly do that in a way that is tying to the salesman at the beginning of Aladdin. You can do it in a way that is offensive or problematic, or not taking other views into consideration. But I'll get to my thoughts on the story in a minute. I don't think he's like fetishizing or tokenizing gay culture here. I really do think we have the straight man in a retirement home, a gay man in a retirement home. They're kind of bonded by this idea of lust being the engine for the last thing we see in death. And when I say I don't want to speak with authority on that, there may be gay people out there who feel completely different. There may be straight people out there who feel completely different. But anyway, I'll say my thoughts on the story. Jen, you had this pretty low as well. I think 18.
Yeah, I had 18,
care to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I think similar to Pfleegor, I just kind of was like, I'm not sure what I get from this. I think it's well written. And I think the interesting things that I pulled out, the interesting concept is I like this thought of like dangerous sexuality. Like this person could give me a disease that I might die from, but I'm so attracted to them that that's the only thing I'm thinking about right now. And I also really like the discussion of what happens when we die, which I always think is interesting when King kind of filters that in, but I don't know. I think, and I agree, I don't think he's tokenizing. I don't think he's being exploitative in any way. It is well written. I was just like, I don't know if I need this, I don't know. Like in the intro, he says, I don't know if I have anything to say about this story. And I think I kind of ended up feeling like that. Like, I don't know if this is a voice that I'm really that interested in on this topic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the concept itself is interesting, in the sense of just how he's able to model this. Like we're all seeing these figures, and they seem to be premonitions of our own deaths. Like that is a cool concept, and I think he does a good job in bringing it home and landing it, because the landing is great in this. Actually, I think this book has a lot of great landings. There's some really incredible kickers that we'll probably discuss later on.
Like the EC Comics style of.
Oh, absolutely, yes. And I thought that he did this with grace. And this is one of the ones where I enjoyed his preface more than the story, which there are many prefaces in this that I actually do think are some of his best writing in this book. But because, as an editor, especially, during the time of the teens when editorial and new media became their own version of the library policeman, I got very frustrated with the idea that, oh no, well, you can't write about rap, or you can't write about, a female director, you can't write about this, you can't write about that. And I come from a long background of research. My parents were researchers, my dad especially. I literally went into college just learning about research, whether it was history or English or film. So it was really limiting and restricting to me to have that philosophy imposed on me by 20-something-year-olds on Twitter and new writers that would come into the writer's room. And so reading this was really it just was really vindicating. And it's one of those things that I love about King, is that he does like to bite his finger at the sort of hyperliterate world, and that's certainly a rule that comes from the hyperliterate world. And I think this story is a pretty good example of that. Like, it's not great, it's not exceptional, but it's good, and it does offer a strong point of view, that one that I think is pretty good. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and talk about my own sexuality, but like, I'm not going to sit here and also criticize him. Actually, he doesn't. It should have been written by a gay guy. Like, no. I think he did a strong job in that capacity. I think there's just a little bit missing with. I think this has an issue of who's the main character, who's the main voice, who's the main eye. Because you have Ollie, and then you also have Dave, and I just don't think it gets very confusing to see where we're supposed to be kind of lining up here. And I do think that it probably could have been, you don't have that kicker of an ending with what happens with Dave, but I do think that maybe Ollie, actually, no, I take it back, because if it wasn't Ollie's point of view, maybe we would actually have a little bit more issues with like what is actually being discussed and detailed. But so I don't know, but it just felt a little thin to me. Sorry.
Yeah. It reminds me in a weird way, like a twinner to one of mine, and I think Jen's favorites too, is Mrs. Todd's Shortcut.
Yes.
I think that there's a lot going on that is similar with these two, but I like Mrs. Todd's Shortcuts so much, of course, from Skeleton Crew. Whereas, this one, it just didn't seem like it was fully fleshed out again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I had this number 5, so I had this pretty high up there.
Oh, wow.
Roffman's was at 10, and then the wrong people in the room were way more. No, just kidding. No, I had it 5 because I think on Mrs. Todd's Shortcut, I love that King has all these, because King has been open about he's spiritual / religious, but doesn't have the definite answer, right? And I love stories of his where he's like, well, maybe this happens in death. Maybe this happens in death, which he has several of these in this collection alone. And I was so taken by this idea that, okay, maybe in heaven, we're with who we love, right? But the last thing we see, the way death appears to us is this intense moment of lust that maybe actually didn't have much of an effect on the rest of our life beyond masturbation fantasies. There's something that felt so like kind of provocative, but also sad and interesting and touching about that I really love the ending, and I think maybe that colored the rest of the story to me. Because I agree with you guys that like it probably is a little thin. It's unclear who the protagonist is, but like I had so many emotions with that ending, because on one hand he's with his son, which is very meaningful, and he's finally getting to see this girl like hike her dress up, and I guess you could look at that as being kind of lecherous. I don't. I'm like, oh no, it's almost this like being taken back to boyhood in kind of a way. One of my favorite books is Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury, and in the sequel to that, he has the young boy kind of exchanging places with this old man who's dying, and it's done in this kind of like masturbation fantasy that I know probably sounds creepy the way I describe it out loud, but it's really not. It's like this. No, he's being taken back to this time of innocence, and I was so moved by that. But yeah, Jen.
This is so interesting. Like I'm like, okay, maybe I need to reread it again. Like I like hearing y'all's like defenses of this too. And on Lady Killers, one thing we've talked a lot about is like the connection between death and sex, and even like the French word for orgasm is le petit mort, which is the little death, So I think that's really interesting. And when I go out, like the last thing I think I want is not necessarily like the life I'm going to leave behind, everything I've done, like people connected to my life. I want this moment of my own pure enjoyment, because it's just about me. My life is ending. So I want it to be at like the pinnacle of physical experience, and that's how you kind of wink out. And that's a great way to go. And Mike, I completely agree with you. And I say this as a woman who writes about a lot of feminist shit. Like if I say that only women can write about girl stuff, then that means only men can write about men's stuff. So I completely agree. Like, and you could tell this story without involving a queer character at all. And I kind of applaud King for like telling it the way he saw it and not being afraid to write it that way. And that's one thing, like, we've talked a lot about King. Like, he doesn't always get it right, but he's always trying and he's always pushing himself forward. And when he gets criticism that maybe you didn't get this right, he listens and he keeps going. And so I do think that this story has a lot of value, even though it ultimately was not one of my favorites.
I think there's something to be. Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. And honestly, the same thing with Caffrey. Like in terms of just where what this is saying about just our own pursuits as human beings and our souls. And I think that there is something like your comment, Jen, about like when you go out, you want your own singular entertainment. And I think that is something that none of us want to admit. And perhaps it's primal. That's why I always laugh when it's like, you go on social media and everyone's just like, and I take it, guys take it way too fucking far because we're scumbags and, we're awful.
Present company notwithstanding.
But everyone has their own primal urges, which is why it's like, I'll like joke. I think I joked on the Crushes episode where it's like, Sammy will go and tweet some stuff that if I did that, oh my God, I'd get like the fucking Frankenstein's mob on me. Like, but at the end of the day, I've always argued, like, I wish we could just acknowledge that, like, at the end of the day, like, all we want to do is get off.
Yeah. And that drives a lot of what we do,
Yeah, it does. And it's not that the way that people pursue it and how, lecherous they can be, takes it to a different level. But I think admitting that, unless you're like Morrissey or he says he's fucking asexual or some bullshit. But like, I think we all, that's what we want. So even in death, I think you are going to go back to that youth when you thought, oh my God, maybe my dreams are achievable.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said about that. And
even I do think we're in and not to get too much of a soapbox, but I love the movie Hitman that just came out. And I remember that.
Love it. Yeah.
It's awesome. And Richard Linklater was talking about the sex scenes, and he got some flack because he's like, oh, I feel like live entertainment, our mainstream entertainment, aka Marvel movies, blockbusters, have become sexless. And he's like, that's stupid. Like, we're going to pretend like we're not all horny human beings to some extent. And like, when I was a kid, he was like, yeah, I like to see sex scenes in movies because I was like, whoa, I want to grow up and do that, you know? Yeah. And once again, that's going to vary person to person, but I like that this story is acknowledging the fact that we all have sex drives, and the fact that's between two men of different sexualities, once again, lends itself to that universality and understanding each other in that kind of way. Yeah, Jen.
Yeah, and I think like this is a really good example of like you can be horny and thirsty on Maine without being objectifying and without kind of victimizing someone else. And I think that's something we also talked about a lot in this Crushes episode is like, where's the line between my own like attraction to someone and me like mauling them or like making them uncomfortable. And I think this is a really good example of the line there. They're just talking about them. They're not really specifically talking about the people they're thinking about. It's just like they exist as an image in their mind.
Yeah, this is quasi tangent, but it has a purpose. I swear to God. So you're talking about the Linklater quote, and it makes me think of just the last Star Wars sequel run, right? So there's enemies to lovers hinted at between Adam Driver's character and Daisy Ridley.
But we don't get to see them fuck.
And but they never push it far enough because Disney's so scared of you know, at the time, especially during that era, of like, oh, we don't want to get too taboo and everything. But here's what happened during that era. You go in, and this is what I learned through Sammy. You know, she's a big bookstagrammer and in book talk. She reads like a lot of these, you know, these smutty books and stuff, and they're so big. The market there is so huge that it's probably making more money than some of the King's books now. And like, there are literally bookstores that are dedicated to it. And there's one that opened up in Roscoe Village in Dan's neighborhood, and it's just funny. I go there, and you see all of these girls, and they're all wearing, you know, like either Taylor Swift or pop star stuff. And when I hear about what are actually in the books, it is the smuttiest fucking shit I've ever heard in my life. Like, there's like a one book that Sammy was telling me about where like a guy like puts the girl's head in a shark infested waters while having sex with her. It's just like, and they like love it, and people are like going nuts. And it's just like, but my point is that, you know, we have this morality police on one side saying, oh no, you know, we don't want, you know, we want to indulge in these urges, but yet it's always going to be there, and it has been. And so you have these mainstream constructs that have been like, well, no, we're not going to put this in here. But then you go deeper into the mainstream, what they're reading, and it's filthier than you could possibly ever imagine. And so, and that's from the opposite side. You know, it's from, you know, a female point of view. You'd expect that mostly from men, according to, you know, or at least from the mainstream eye. So I just think that's funny that I know, I think it speaks to this story. God, that's a fucking stretch, but I do think it speaks to the story because it's that primal urge that's in us. And I think if you really want to get on a soapbox with tinfoil hats on top of it, I think King is possibly saying that, like, you know, there is this sort of point of view about the queer community of that, like, oh, it's just a sex crazed community, but in the end of the day, we all are sex crazed. And I think, I mean, that's a stretch argument, but I don't know. I think there could be some weight to that. So
yeah.
I always want like an Avengers movie or like a Pixar movie just to cut to like when they do that hinting thing, they do just to cut to two characters. Oh fuck yeah, like just South Park style.
It's just so hot. Like come on,
I know.
Mr. Yummy,
Mr. Yummy.
Like doing it on the Shield, you know.
Well, hey, look, what is it? Rule 37 or 50?
Rule 34.
Whatever, like, you can find it. You can find it.
Like, you don't know it. Okay.
Yeah.
We were watching Beauty and the Beast last night because we were watching all these Disney movies. We were heading off to Disney because, you know, I'm turning 40, going on to 10. And and I was watching Beauty and the Beast, and I was just like turning to Sammy, and I'm a little tired at that point, but I'm like, there has got to be so much Rule 34 with like Beast and even Gaston. And she was just like, yeah, you could do that with Google with anything. And let's just say the Googling commenced, and
it didn't.
Well, it's all this shit that I used to throw on our text threads that were just at random intervals. It'd be like 2 a.m. I'm like, oh, here's Hagrid going to town on his dog.
Dobby. I wake up to his text that says Belle can get it.
Well, yeah, we've talked a lot about sex. Well, let's talk about death, specifically a death, which is our number 15 story. Kind of a Western yarn a little bit. Let's see who had this the highest. We actually all had, we all had this between 12 and 15, so not a ton of variation on this one. Jen, why don't you kick us off? What were your thoughts about this? Did King achieve the Western as someone who doesn't like the Dark Tower so much?
Yeah, and I also don't really like Westerns, and I think that's part of the reason that I didn't really love The Dark Tower and this one. This one I had a lot lower on my first read. This was one of the ones I remember not being excited to read again. And I enjoyed it a lot more this time, I think partly because I knew what was going to happen, and so I could kind of enjoy the trees instead of the forest, you know. And I think the Western thing notwithstanding, and also it does really gross me out, the concept of like eating this coin over and over again after it's been in your ass, you know?
Yeah.
But I think what I was really drawn to, one, I think it gets in and it gets out. It doesn't really overstay its welcome. And I like that a lot. But this idea of like this guy, he is so convinced that this guy didn't do it. And the first time I was reading it, I was convinced too. I was like, we're going to find out. It was somebody else. He didn't do it. And so it almost feels like a betrayal at the end when you find out, no, he did do it. You know, he is kind of a bad guy, even though he wants us to feel sympathetic. And I felt that was really a really relatable emotion. And I think that's why I enjoyed it the second time, as I was watching the sheriff like really fall for his act and really want to believe the best in this guy. And then I really loved the nihilistic kind of gotcha at the end of like, no, he did it. He's a bad guy, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And I think I had this at like 13 or 12. And once we get to that point, it's not like I
Exactly.
have a ton of
I just liked others better. Yeah.
I do think it's one of those stories that is defined so much by the ending. You know, I can't remember the characterizations too much of the two main characters who were talking. I read this, I was seeing a concert and I was waiting for the band to start. And so this was the last story I read before the concert started. And later on when I was doing my rankings, I couldn't I'm like, which story am I missing? I only had 19 rankings. I couldn't figure out which one it was. It was a death. I think I'd forgotten about it. So the only reason it's low for me is that like I too love the ending, but I feel like it just rides on its ending and not much else.
Yeah, I think the title's a bit of a misnomer because there's two deaths, right?
Oh.
King's being a little jester there.
Being having a little fun, but it is. Have you ever seen the Robert Crumb documentary?
Yeah, I love Crumb.
Where the brother swallows like a 30-foot length of string to pass through his body.
Maxon, the creepy brother, who's
he does it as like a ritual, and that's what it reminded me of. Just
the guy's fucking
swallowing
weird,
this
man.
coin and processing it over and over again. It's very weird.
And that guy was a big creep, Maxon. I think he got arrested for like sexual assault. His other brother dies, right? I think before the Y'all should watch Crumb.
Watch Crumb. It's a really good doc.
Yeah, it is good, but a little saddening. Is Crumb's still around, right?
Yeah,
I think
lives in France, I believe.
Yeah. But Roffman, what did you think of this story?
So I've been on a Western kick just because I've been on a Clint Eastwood kick, and I've probably watched Unforgiven at least like 5 times this year alone. But so I'm all in, and I also really love Elmer Leonard, which this is dedicated to, and especially watching Justified and what have you, and reading a couple of his stories this year. So I'm really become charmed and taken in with Western storytelling. And I was just speaking to J.T. Molnar, the director and writer of Strange Darling, which you could hear that interview over the Halloween East feed. And he's actually writing The Long Walk. But one of his first debuts was the Western. And I said to him, I was like, well, if you could nail the Western, don't you think you could you pretty much have the foundation to be able to do any type of genre storytelling? And that's kind of how I've always looked at it, as like a prism for that. And we were kind of wrestling with that idea a little bit. And I think when you look at this story, it's kind of interesting because I was trying to other than obviously The Dark Tower, I can't think of too many Western style tales that King has. And so it's kind of cool to see him go back to this a little bit, and obviously in a more grounded light, because this is certainly one of the more grounded stories in this collection, and not let alone in his oeuvre. And I really do love what it says at the end, because I was with the sheriff. You know, I was actually picturing Gene Hackman as the sheriff a little bit, but again, because I'm watching Unforgiven, but I was genuinely surprised by the ending of this. Yeah, I thought there was going to be some sort of revelation or whatever, but I love the twist, and I love what it says about how easily we are manipulated on these things, because we often think too highly of people sometimes. And I think that this is one of those, God, I wish I wasn't right I wish I wasn't right. I wish I wasn't that cynical, because, we look at the world, especially me, I'm very cynical about this world, and I am depressed at how often I'm proven right and this is what this feels in that sort of ballpark sentiment.
Yeah, it's kind of the anti-Green Mile in a way.
Yeah.
But that's, I think, because I like the ending of the Green Mile so much. So this one too, I was a little let down. But I think the stories, we've been very critical, I think, because we're doing, the ranking from least liked climbing. Yeah. So we're starting to get there. I feel like it's starting to pick up a little bit. Like I'm starting to find more sweet spots within all of these that we're discussing now. So
yeah.
And I'm not trying to like just stroke all y'all's egos, but hearing other insights about like, oh yeah, it's like the anti-Green Mile. That's cool to me because I'm like, oh yeah, it's something we rag on King sometimes for is like, oh, he's too sentimental, he's too optimistic. But it's like, no, he shows here he can go the other way, which I think is just important as a storyteller and not getting pigeonholed. So yeah, I love hearing that.
Has anyone read The Hair of Harold Rue? Because that's what he says as like he was, inspired by. He says it's like one of the best books ever written about writing. And I don't know, I kind of want to check that out. There's a couple of things that he recommends in these prefaces that I'm like, I should have consulted these before, but
I wrote down
you do Patreon series,
Yeah.
Yeah. No, seriously. King's Corner.
King's Corner. Yeah.
No, I wrote down which story is it later on? It was some movie that inspired it, a horror movie I'd never heard of. I'm like, oh, watch that for Halloween Hell this year. So yeah. Anything else to say about a death before we move on to our next story?
I just want to get it out of my system. Mr. Yummy. I don't know why.
Jesus Christ.
Like he got that corner.
I can't. Mike's talking about the bookstore, and I'm like, I just want to go in there and order that, see how they react.
Yummy.
Yummy.
We talked about a death. This next story is alive, although it has maybe the most number of deaths in this book. Herman Wouk is still alive, which is also unfortunately not true. He died a few years ago, but he lived to be very old. Is he a poet or a short story writer, Herman Wouk? Poet, right? I think. Anyway, this is the story. I ended up ranking this pretty high, and so did Mike and Pfleegor. I think we all had it hovering between like 8 and 10. But I struggled with it. I was like back and forth between ranking it really low and really high because I was like, oh, is this like fetishizing the lower class? Is it just a miserable story? But I ended up putting it high. I'll save my thoughts for it. But Jen, you had this at 17, so share. I'd love to hear the other side of that.
Yeah, I had this at 17. Coming out of my first read, I had this at 20. I hated this story the first time I watched it. I was really angry and upset about it. And I think now looking back, I think part of the reason is because I had like a 3 and a 5-year-old, and I did not want to read this story about mothers deciding they were overwhelmed and that there was no future for their children. And especially knowing that it was something that had really happened. And I remember that story. I remember hearing about that woman driving on the wrong side of the road. And I think it has really stuck with me. And so hearing this like really beautifully written and really like emotional story about this awful thing that I really struggled to admit had actually happened and that like could be in a world where I was having children and caring for young kids in the same world. I was like, fuck this story. I don't want to ever read this again. When I did my reread, I skipped it and I was almost going to skip it for this, but I was like, no, I got to do my due diligence because I was so upset by it the first time. And I read it this time and I think I'm curious what y'all think, because the first time I read this, I felt a real racial element to it. I felt like the friends were Black and so reading it on the page had a real kind of classy or like classless, I think, like exploitative feel of like this is Black suffering that I just didn't feel I needed. But then when I heard the audiobook, I got the other side of it, and I don't know if it was because of the reader. It's read by Kathleen Chalfant, who's not somebody I knew, but she reads it in the voice of like a sorority sister, And
is she a white lady? I'm guessing.
I think so. Yeah. I'd have to look for sure, but like so I didn't have that racial element to it as I was listening to it, and it made me think, okay, maybe I brought that to the story the first time I was listening. Maybe that was my own perception, and I liked it more this time. But I find it really upsetting and a lot of it feels like misery porn to me. And it was a hard thing for me to accept. And I'm not saying it's bad. it was really upsetting to me. So I think that's why it's so low for me.
Yeah,
I would agree it's an unpleasant one. Yeah, Pfleegor.
I would say I think class definitely plays into this a lot, and I think maybe because I have fantasies about being in the intelligentsia literati class, so I like the perspective of the poets and just like, oh, I had all these former lovers, and I knew all the right people, and it's like la di da, but then you just see how quickly they get jolted back to reality, and it's like all their high society ways that just amount to nothing when there's just corpses in front of them. So I think in this one, I did enjoy more the perspective of the poets. Like I liked when I was in that world. And I also did the audiobook after reading it. And I think you're right. Like there were certain things I put on it, and then I'm glad I read it first before having it read to me in the audiobook, because it was a little bit different just by the, vocal range of the person reading it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's, I too, I really enjoy it from being a study in contrast between the poets and the women. And I feel like not devaluing the perspectives of either of them, because I don't think King is like anti-poetry, but I do think you're right, Pfleegor, that like in the face of real life and death, like what does writing mean, right? It's not to say it's not important, but it definitely gets overshadowed when certain things happen in life. As far as to Jenn's observation about the race issue, it's funny because I thought about King's own upbringing going into this, and obviously being a white man, raised in poverty and living in poverty himself too, when he was first married and had a lot of kids and all that. So I think for me, I just looked at it. I think that's part of why I did give it a pass and viewed it as not being exploitative, because I guess I just assumed that he was somewhat drawing on his own perspective and his own history with his mom. I mean, we do get some, well, no, it's weird. We get the fat thing in here. He says like, oh, picture this, the two fat women, blah, blah. But it actually felt different than, comparing Carrie White's mom to like Grendel's mother, whatever it is. Like it didn't feel grotesque. It was almost like this is how the world sees them, and this is the miserable experience they're gonna go down. I do agree that I really enjoyed the story. I thought it lived up to its literary constraints. It was published in The Atlantic first, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is the type of story that would be in The Atlantic. I do agree that it is upsetting, especially as a parent, because I can't imagine any scenario where I would do that.
Yeah.
At the same time, it does happen, and do we not extend empathy to those people in the situation there? And that's a tough question to wrestle with, because they kind of commit an unforgivable act in many ways, but you do feel sympathy for these characters, which I think is a hard trick to pull off. So love hearing those different perspectives about it.
I also want to clarify too, I looked it up, and it's actually read by two people. Kathleen Chalfant reads the Herman Wouk side, and Brooke Bloom reads the Young Mothers. And yes, they both are white women. And yeah, I think you're right. Like, we do need to extend empathy. Now, my first empathy is to their children, but like, if the purpose of extending empathy to people who do something like this is to understand why, what are the conditions that would cause somebody to drive their children into a tree? Like, what makes their life look so unlivable, and how can we help it not feel that way? And I think it's the kind of thing, like, I love the stories where you can feel King working something out in his own mind. Like, he's trying to reconcile how this can happen. And I think that's part of why I was really drawn to Holly, the newest novel, because I think he's really working through some mindsets that he finds really challenging in that story. And I see him in this one, like, how could this happen? How can we live in a world where this happens? And I wonder if I just don't want to understand that. It just feels so like abrasive that I'm like, no, I don't want to read a story that and I'm not saying that we shouldn't, it's so hard for me to do that,
Yeah. And I think, just going back to class again, so the poets get to choose their lovers, whereas in this, in the beginning, there's the comment of like, well, don't worry, your dad's got a vasectomy after the incest happens. So it's like, she has no choice, her children have no choice in life, they have very little autonomy in choosing their future. And this almost is a moment where they get to choose it by crashing the car, versus the poets, who really do live like an enchanted, dreamlike life, and have lived a long time too. They've been enjoying that good life for a while, whereas these kids are just starting.
There is this running theme in the book, and I guess a lot of King's work, if I think back on characters like Harold Lauder, for instance, from The Stand, there is this theme in some of the stories here of taking agency of your own death. And once again, I'm not advocating for doing that in a way that harms others, especially your children.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking of this and Summer Thunder at the end, and they have similar kinds of spins. Yeah, and Jen, it's funny. I have not tried to read Pet Sematary, since having a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But I watched. Wait, you're a fan of Come and See, right? Am I making that up?
I am. I think
Dan
I'm the
Pfleegor
only one who's
talked
watched it here, other than you.
It's this movie about Belarus during World War II, and this kid who volunteers to be a soldier for like on the Allied side for the Russians, and goes off with all this glory, and of course that gets stripped away the more carnage he sees in war. And there's this very infamous scene where it's like a 20-minute, scene of the Nazis like burning an entire village alive. It's horrible, but I mean it's a great movie, but like horrible, hard to watch. And there's a scene where like this mother manages to get out of the cottage that they're burning with her kid, and then they just throw the kid back in, and you don't see any violence. You just see the kid get kind of tossed like a rag doll, and it was so hard for me to watch because like I could picture Boone flailing through the air like that. It's just this visceral thing, so it makes it very upsetting.
Yeah,
I'm
the movie's
interested
come
to
up a
see.
few times actually. Justin's a big fan as well.
Yeah. Oh, of Boone. Mike, what did you think of Herman Wouk is Still Alive?
This one's really, really dark, and I loved how just visceral it gets in terms of just the grimy reality. I know a lot of people will look at this and say it's fatphobic and also classist, but I just loved how scathing it was with its own reality, like the realization of just their situation, and that sobering realization, I guess pun intended, while they're driving and realizing, oh, this is just kind of a bot sort of moment of happiness, and it's not even that great. Like, oh, they're going to complain about the pool, or someone's going to get in the pool and hurt in the pool, and wow, they'll have air conditioning for like the next day or two. Like, there's just something so real about it, and in that case, like, this is something that's going to stick with me. It's like, what was the story that's in, I believe it's Everything is Eventual, where it's, is it like Danny? It's not, it's the one with the guy who's in the motel. And
All That You Love Will Be Carried Away.
Yeah.
Like that, it reminded me of just this really slice of life story that you don't want to be a part of. You're like, oh, this is a little too realistic. This is the nightmare that I see when I'm waiting for my plane, or I'm in the grocery store and I'm just like, oh, I'm just thankful I have my own shit in my life, but I'm thankful I'm not part of that. And there's something really terrifying and scary and sad, and this is one of those stories that I think will stick with me. I don't necessarily think it works. I don't really like the poet stuff that's part of it. I think it actually is fine if you were split on both sides, but it works. It still pulls it off, but it's the stuff that happens between Brenda and Jasmine that just really, 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 really rough.
Well, and I think the poet part is interesting because, like, I wanted to shout out the King's Dominion here. We have the poets are Phil Henreid and Pauline Ensslin. So I kind of see that side of it as I was able to read it without feeling so shocked by what was happening. Like, I wonder if that's King kind of examining his own privilege, of like, because these are two old writers and they're writers from like, they're his canon, it feels like they are him and himself, and like examining like my life is so great that I'm never going to be questioned. I'm never going to have this question. And when they see the wreckage, it's like they cannot hide from the other part of society, the part that they just drive by in their big car, and not saying that they're doing anything wrong. Like, this is just kind of unexamined privilege. And I think we see kind of King reckon with that as well, which I do find interesting.
It would be funny if the van goes by and like, wow, who's that? And he's like, it's probably my no good cousin Lloyd and his buddy Poke. They're always knocking over convenience stores and oh boy, yeah, no. All right, well, yeah, and it's funny because I think this is a story we had varying opinions on. As far as our rankings go, we can all agree it's like a hard hitting, very effective story. Let's switch it up a little bit though. Let's get to like spooky ooky is not the right word, but I could see this in a Twilight Zone anthology. This is number 13, The Little Green God of Agony. Yeah, this is like middle of the road for me, Mike and Pfleegor. I enjoyed it just as being like, I know we always joke about like King being kind of Pixar-esque with like Stationary Bike and some of these other stories that explain how the inner workings of the body goes. But I always think it's fun when he does that. Like I like this idea that it's this little green god, little kooshball god that we have to get out. So I mean, it didn't blow me away, but also it's just like a fun story. Pfleegor, what do you
definitely
think?
like a creep show vibe. It
Yes.
has like
Yes.
episodic. And it was funny because I was thinking of like the green thing. It almost is like spiked. And I was like, oh, it reminds me of like COVID virus. Obviously, this is written before that. But I just had like a bunch of funny notes in this. Like when the guy's saying like, in the name of Jesus Christ, I was thinking of the Nathan Fielder preacher from Nathan For You. He's like, I command you in the name of Jesus Christ. But yeah, it was just like, there's like a Tom and Jerry element to it too, of like slapping the mouse with the broom, right? So I just thought it was kind of a funny
I like it when he
goofball.
gets cartoony a little bit sometimes. And I think it works best in stories like this, where it's like once again, like a King's version of Inside Out or something. Mike, what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, this is a fun one. I was reading this on the treadmill, and so it was.
Oh wait, not the stationary bike?
No, not a stationary bike. I bought like a little treadmill pad that I've always been skeptical of these things because I was like, they're probably gonna break down or whatever. But hey, knock on wood, it's been great.
Like the
especially
walking desk thing.
There's like a little walking desk pad
I should
thing.
get one
So
of those.
I was just I'd been sitting all weekend reading this, so I was like, I gotta stretch my legs a little bit, and I was glad this was the story because it's so action oriented, you know, like whether or not it's them, it's one room, which I love. Anytime he can pull off a one location thing, awesome. But it felt very like there's so much action going on in terms of just like the like between the pepper spray getting hit. I mean, it's very funny, but also like frantic. And so it was kind of like a perfect propulsive read for me to read as I was sweating myself. I don't know why I gave all that context. It has absolutely nothing to do with the short story, I guess, but Creepshow is a good way to describe this, and there are a few of these stories in this collection. And while I don't think this one reaches, the heights of his greatest Creepshow stories, and also even like the Night Shift and stories and the Skeleton Crew stories, there's something to be said about him taking what he used to do that was EC Comics-esque and very old, and then also marrying it with his new style that we saw in, say, Revival. Where he's talking about themes of faith and the afterlife, and what this, and pain, and what all this means. And I actually thought for a second that there was going to be a link to Revival in this story, just because it's so similar to what he was kind of going to be wrestling with. But when you think about it, it's 2011. He writes the story. It's in the mind, and this is definitely one of those things where I think he was. I'm looking at it politically in our country and just where it was going on with like the Tea Partiers and a lot of the right wing moral majorities and stuff. I see that all swimming in his brain, and it comes alive in this. And it's kind of cool. Again, it's kind of cool just to see his trajectory and how I would imagine a lot of the themes he's kicking around in this. He would be like, all right, I gotta extrapolate on this a little bit more. Let me do Revival, or let me even as I'm working on, was it Joyland, which was not like too far from this, where there are a lot of these type of themes as well with the grandfather in that story. It's on his mind, so it's cool that he was able to use an EC Comics style engine to be able to wrestle with it, because that's kind of what I wanted a little bit more of in Revival, but. It's, anyway, that was a long-winded explanation. Jesus Christ.
I completely agree. And I like how, as King has aged, yes, we get more literary fiction like Herman Wouk and The Man in the Black Suit, but we also get those little short and nasty bits like EC Comics style. Jen, I saved you for last. You had this at number 1.
Yes.
And we all like this story.
Oh, wow.
Please
interesting.
go off.
Because you texted about this. Yeah.
I did, yeah.
What you love about it, yeah.
This is the one coming out of reading it the first time that I remembered, and I was really excited about, and I really loved it. It's this dark and stormy night energy that I really love, and I had read it in the shadow of Revival, but it's a lighter Revival. It doesn't go as hard and it doesn't go as dark. And I think it's just really creepy. It's really fun. And then reading it the second time, I kind of figured out what it was I was connecting to with it. And I think we hear it from the role of a caretaker. And, as a mom who is constantly caring for other people, I think I really connected with that. And I found it like it challenged me to really question a lot of things. Like there is this tendency, especially like when you just got to get out of the house, you got to get your shit together, you got to make sure your kids' shoes are tied and all that stuff, to kind of dismiss problems, and dismiss pain. And, Corey has this fear of flying, and I love flying on planes. And so I keep trying to like get him to go on vacations where we have to fly. And he's like, no. And I feel like I kind of dismiss that. I'm like, that's not real. You take a Xanax, you'll be fine, And so as I was reading this, I was like, well, am I being an asshole and not taking his pain seriously? Because I've got my own shit, and like I have my own irrational fears, like of alligators, but I'm working through it, and like we're going to the beach, and I just found there was a lot of catharsis in this lady who had been thinking about her patient as like a piece of lazy shit who just won't do the work, and then finally she realizes like no, it really does mean something to him. Like this is overwhelming. And even though like there is probably a little bit of both sides of that, like he probably was being a little bit lazy too, but she had never really suffered anything to this magnitude. And I really liked this element of the shoe finally being on the other foot and her finally like having some kind of comeuppance in a way that like is really tangible. And I love the idea of just like a pain goblin, that just like attaches to your shoulder and it's like you can't get it off. And okay, and again, like as a woman, like our pain is a lot of times dismissed, and we're told that it's in our heads, and like with fibromyalgia or something like that, it's like, oh, it's not real, you're imagining it. And so I really found a lot of catharsis in just like having it be acknowledged, no, this is real. And it also allows me to do my favorite thing, which is like armchair psychiatrist to King, because I mean clearly he was writing about his own experience with what's the word I'm looking for, with rehab, and you can really tell that he's pulling from his own memories. And I wonder what color his pain was, and if this is kind of like how he was feeling laying in the bed. So it just like this was firing on all cylinders. It's a fun read. Again, it doesn't overstay its welcome. And it gave me like 3 different veins to really kind of intellectually dive into. So it's just everything I wanted.
I love that. I love hearing like I said, I didn't dislike this story, but I love hearing these alternate perspectives of how much a certain story moves someone, and it just gets you to think about it.
Have you ever wanted to live a Mucinex commercial? Now you can.
Yeah, I mean,
exactly. Yeah, I'm telling you, I come out of all of these episodes thinking like maybe I should read this again. Maybe I like seeing it from y'all's perspective too.
Well, it also reminded me of Robin Williams' Flubber, to bring it back to Robin.
Little green god of flubbery.
A flubber.
Equally chaotic too.
Yeah. I saw Alien Resurrection with my dad while my mom and sister saw Flubber. So I never saw it.
Oh, wow. Whoever wins, we lose.
Yeah. I mean, I like Resurrection.
I do too, yeah.
I like Resurrection also.
But is it better than Flubber?
I mean, who's to say?
I did rewatch Flubber. Again, I've been on a Disney kick because once we have a theme that we're going to aim for, we just go all in.
Yeah.
And it was like during the day, and I just was like looking around, just like working through different reports. And I'm like, man, like, where's my life gone where it's like 3:00 in the day, I'm like working and then Flubber's in the background and I don't have kids. Like, the hell is this about? Like, where did my life go?
Flubber a remake?
Probably.
I think
wasn't it the Nutty Professor? Or no, never mind. Or somehow it was a...
I feel like Jerry Lewis would be in that movie.
Yeah. Well, let me look it up real quick.
I think Jerry Lewis
Flubber is... I know Flubber is in the Figment ride, the Journey of the Imagination at Epcot.
Love Figment.
It always cracks me up when my kids are watching something and I'll talk to either you and Sammy and find out that y'all are also enjoying it,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it says it is a remake of The Absent-Minded Professor.
That's it.
Which
weird.
Which starred Fred McMurray, Nancy Olson, Keenan Wynn. So
Keenan Wynn, one of my favorite Rankin Bass voice actors. Love Keenan Wynn. Weird. I knew Absent-Minded Professor. I did not know that it was Flubber, though. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I have no good segue. We're just going to go to number 12. Premium Harmony. Now, I'm starting to recognize a little bit of a trend here. Because this is another fairly miserable story. Mm-hmm. Definitely in the vein of Raymond Carver, in my opinion. I've read his short story collection, What We Talk About When We Talk About Love, where the meaning is maybe a little bit obscure, but it's very cold. And I think the characters don't even know what they're experiencing. But I'm noticing a trend where Mike Pfleegor and I read this in the middle-ish again. Jen, you had this pretty low. And I don't mean to like keep picking on the outlier, and I'll be the outlier soon enough, don't worry. But kick us off, because I guess the trend I'm noticing was this another instance of, I just don't want to see this shit. Like, this is a really dark story.
It is really dark, and it also, like, this has a Southern vibe to it that feels really familiar to me too, even though I'm sure the characters probably were not set in the South. Like, I don't think he specifically gives us a setting, but like, this feels like the kind of people I see in like Smyrna or Laverne, and that I have kind of grown up resisting becoming, like, I don't want to be these couples that are constantly arguing with each other. And like, we get a fucking dog death in this, and like,
not the first, though.
Not the first.
The last.
No, yeah. And I think, but it just thinking about being in this situation and living this thing out was just so upsetting to me. It was not what I wanted to experience at all in the moment. I did like it a little bit more on second read, but like, I remember coming out of this, and this was, I think, because it's pretty early in the short story collection, and I think I may have put the collection down for a little bit after this, because I didn't want to, with a young mom with 2 kids, I didn't want to think about not having a partner anymore. And also, it's just so sad. The last thing he says to her, that was like resonating in my mind too. And hearing him like thinking about whether he could get a mercy fuck, it's like, I don't want to spend any more time with these people. And I think all that to say, it's a very well-written story, and I think the fact that it affected me so much speaks to how good it is. It just was not something that I wanted to really dive too much further into.
Yeah, it's telling that, and this is the number 2 story, so the first instance of like high unpleasantness in a book that has a lot of unpleasantness also was in the New Yorker, so clearly King making his literary bid there. Yeah, Mike?
That's exactly what I was going to bring up, is the New Yorker piece to this, because it's set in Castle Rock, which is I'm seeing on Wikipedia,
that's right.
which is but you're right though. We forget though that before Carrie, King was living a rough fucking life, a rough life, and he's really stuck to the blue collar roots a lot, or at least tried to. And there is a part of me that like, I really do want just a very grounded, grimy look at where that slice of America has gone, because even when he gets to the most blue collar notions in even his recent novels, they never get to like the depths as these stories. And there's a mundanity to America, particularly as we evolve, and every town looks like it's the same. They have the Target, they have the Walmart, they have the road stop that has every corporation tied to it, etc. So it's beginning, I think we have this misunderstanding to think that like, oh yeah, we know the lower class, but I'm pumping my gas here and it's at this, this outpost, and I'm going to a Walmart, and things can't be that bad. But when you look at this story, and then you also look at, say, the one that we just discussed, the Herman Oak, there's this sort of reality that you've all just said right now, is that I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want to see this. And that is America at a growing rate right now. And I do wish that instead of doing like Holly, he would go and do something like this, because he's really good at it. And this is a very real portrait of just how cruel life can be and just how fast it could end. And so, not to put her in the spotlight too much, but like Sammy's father died last year, and he passed away at just a gas station. And it was like, that was like really hard to chew through, because it's just like, how does it, like, you go through all this stuff in life, and he was like, he got through so many things, but that was how he passed. And it's just, that's the thing. Like, there's no emotion to life. It just is. And that's why this story is another one that does stick with me. And it's funny that you're like, oh, I had to put it down, Jen, because I was kind of the same way. I remember going to get a drink or something like that after this, and I remember ranking this, and I was like, wait, what is Premium Harmony? And it's like my mind had already tried to like put it away. And anyway, that's a long-winded way to say it, but I think that King, lean on the literary chops some, because you can do it anyway. We've talked about it. We've praised it all this time. Just give us give us a Needful Things in a lower class America right now.
Yeah.
That's what I want. So
no, seriously, I agree, man. And he, he said he's always very humble when talk about imitating other writers, and he's like, "Oh, I'm trying on Carver's skin here," but like, I don't know, man. I think this is up there with Carver's best stories, and I like it more than a lot of Carver's stories too. Jenn and Pfleegor.
Well, and it's interesting. Like, I think now we are talking and we're hearing a lot about like non-college educated white people, because that is something in the electorate we're really looking at. And then after Hillbilly Elegy, like there has been such a push in the political world to really understand this kind of person here. And I find it personally really frustrating as a Southerner because I see a lot of these people and I'm like, no, that doesn't excuse their bullshit, just because they have like a lower socioeconomic status. Like there's still a lot of problems with like racism and like just things that I have grown up trying to distance myself from. And I think that's part of what frustrates me. And I think I do think that there is a benefit in understanding people that would vote against their own interests or would, I don't know, spend their last dollar on cigarettes. I understand that, but it really frustrates me because I'm like, well, yeah, but you still don't have to be an asshole. And so I feel like this is kind of King kind of wrestling with that. And with Herman Wouk still alive too, is like, how do I am not lower class anymore. Like I'm not living in a trailer. And what does that look like? And I think I just find it really unpleasant, but I do think it is a good thing to do. And he is doing it at the beginning of us talking about a lot of that stuff too. So I don't feel like he's being exploitative here. It just reading it in 2024, I was like, I have had enough,
It is kind of crazy that this was, and probably written because where was it?
Published in 2009.
Wow. Yeah. So that's pretty like, and once again, because we've talked a lot about like, how does he have authenticity here? And I think he does, given his background, both being raised as a kid when he was poor and before Carrie hit. Like, I did think he had an eye on this before a lot of folks did. Pfleegor, what are your Pfleegor? You've been quiet over there.
Yeah, I'm just waiting my turn. But no, I think that's the most existential, most existential of the short stories. Like, I mean, it reminded me of like Camus' The Stranger, or even like the Coen brothers, The Man Who Wasn't There. Where there's really not any motivation that could be. It's just sort of this blank existence. And I think it's really sad when you think why they're going to Walmart. And it's like they have to get grass seed because their lawn is presumably in terrible shape. So there's really nothing redeeming in this lifestyle, right? And you feel bad for people to have addiction. It's not like life ruining, but cigarettes or the Hostess. And they both feel a shame about, I guess he shames her more so. But I got to say with this book, I totally forgot that the dog was in the car. So I lost track of that while I was reading it. And
just like the husband.
But I can understand how that happens because it like snuck up on me. I was like, oh, wait, when he went back. But then when he's driving to the hospital, he's like, well, now I don't have to roll the windows down. And he just smokes with the air conditioning on and the windows, which is, I did not expect.
Do you think he's happy at the end? I couldn't tell.
Yeah, I think he feels a sense of relief at the very least.
Wow.
You know what this is like? It's like the word processor of the gods, which is like the beginning of his thing, which just like at the end, it's, everyone always gets hanging with the morals of it all, but no, it's a happy ending for that guy.
It's good for him, horror,
Yeah, as uncouth as it is. The politics of this is, without getting too deep into politics, because we know, everyone doesn't want to be.
I don't want to run stars.
No one wants to explore the gray area, but I'm going to. I think one of it's interesting and telling that this was in 2009, because I do think that there was a sense of hope through the Obama campaign that the social class issues were going to be addressed in this country. And I don't think they were. I think they were largely dismissed. And I think that has been one of the follies of the Democratic Party. And I'm pretty sure that I wonder if King is like almost like squarely keying into this because, Jen, I'm thinking about what you were just saying. Is that like, you don't want to, you don't want to contend or become these people, but you also don't want to forget that these people exist. And that's the truth. And that's the thing that I've been largely trying to stress to a lot of liberal friends. Cause look, I'm a liberal myself, but I hate my party. Well, I hate myself, but I also hate my party. So, hey, I guess it goes hand in hand, but I've said like, the worst thing that anyone could have done is just treated the lower class like the enemy, especially, white lower class, which is a big part of this country, and there's a lot of problems that are tied to it, and you can understand why they are and where they are. And I think that a lot of it is probably self-deprecation too on their part, because they know how shit this world is, and there's no one out there actually even offering a rope. And I do see that in this story. I know people will probably say, oh, it's problematic that he's, chiding his wife for being obese, and, oh, he just wants his own vices for smoking. But like, I've lived in this world and too, like a little bit with my mom who passed away too. And there are things that you are self-aware about, but it doesn't matter because there's no escape sometimes. And I think that's where the compassion, for lack of a better word, comes in. And I'm not saying that King's compassionate here, but he's compassionate enough to write about this slice of life and be real with it. And I think that's compassionate enough for me. And that's why I'm kind of stressing, like, I do think that these stories are important, because I do think that, I mean, not to sound like, again, not to get on a soapbox, but I think the more that we know and acknowledge that this is a reality for majority of the Americans, like, I think that's a more reason for people to stand up and go, yeah, we do need to figure this fucking shit out. Like, this needs to change. But anyway, that's a lot that I'm imposing on this story, but it's what came to mind while reading it.
I think it's there,
Yeah.
And I think what I like so much about it, even though I ranked it pretty low and it frustrates me, is like he's writing about these people without valorizing them. And I think that's what I get so frustrated about when I look at politics. It's like, yes, we need to understand people that live in this community, but they're not the only community, and they are not the most important community, and we don't need to make them our heroes. And like, I don't see him doing that in this. This does feel very, very real.
Yeah, and I also think just on the topic of like lack of hope, he gets like comped a pack of cigarettes, and he's like, "Oh, okay, cool." It's like, your wife just died, but this is the first thing that's gone right in his life in a while.
Silver
I got a
lining.
free pack of smokes. What a windfall!
Yeah. I mean, I freak out and have for a long time, all the time, about climate change, right? And COVID and big picture shit that I really can't do much to solve, right? And I remember like when my parents were visiting me in Austin right as the pandemic was happening, like right before school shut down, lockdown came aboard, and South by had just gotten canceled. And I was just in like such a panic about it. And then I got a piece of good news that I was like a finalist for this writing thing. They didn't end up getting, so it didn't matter. And I was like, oh, great. Like, I was like, fine the rest of the day. Then like, I didn't get that. And then the world went to shit. So I think that's
very optimistic story. Yes. But it is, I think the ordering of this is a very interesting story to put as number 2, because having not read this book in years, from the monsters and was it Mile 81 to this, that's quite an impact, quite a 1-2 punch.
It's a tone setter on either side,
Totally. He's
Bazaar. We specialize in bad dreams.
That's right. Of all
kinds.
kinds.
Out the big guns. Well, hey, we're talking about this cruel world. Let's go to another world that's also kind of cruel, but it's on a bus, so that's fun. Our number 11 story is that bus is another world. I have a feeling we probably all identify what this story is getting at. I like this one quite a bit just because it was so short and nasty. I actually felt the most EC Comics to me. I love how, once again, that theme of characters being at a crossroads, and the guy picks the total like self-serving crossroads, which also ties to what we talked about. That was what I enjoyed about it. And the sequence of the girl getting stabbed was just like super creepy, almost like a giallo movie to me. But Pfleegor, you had this pretty low, I think at like 17. Share your thoughts. No, actually, no. Yeah, 17.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on the story?
This one felt unfinished. Like, this one felt like kind of a thought workshop or something, thought exercise. But there's a story, and you like it darker, with the bench. I don't want to give away the ending, but that's like a better version of that story to me. If you remember the random encounter with a stranger on a bench. But what is the Twilight's fear at 20,000 feet?
Yeah.
It has similar to that. I don't. It's just like this one. It wasn't. I saw what he was going for, but I also like didn't really care. And it was like, oh, you're late for this meeting. Just that's a perfect excuse to not go to the meeting. Is like, oh, I just witnessed a murder and I had to report. If anything, that makes you more heroic for your job. But maybe I'm just approaching it from a self-serving point of view.
You've worked in marketing. They don't care.
I know. No, that's what I'm saying. It's like,
give me a fucking break.
I know.
You think these, especially the oil industry, they'd be like, oh, this is not the right guy for us. If that's the case.
But I also, as someone who's like has sleeping issues, like I hate being late in the morning, and there's like a sense of panic when you're late. So I don't enjoy being in that world. Much the same as like you don't enjoy being in where families are getting hurt. I'm being in a world that's late or running late and speeding is just like, oh, I hate that.
That's Dan's nightmare, on par with my children dying.
Yeah.
So
See, it sounds like you should be in Vegas for this day. You're one of the guys who like the trains on time. Mike, you had this ranked upper middle, similar to me. What about you?
Yeah, there's a quote that Tom Yorks said that I think it's for in Rainbows or maybe it's King of Limbs, but he talked about how he had this anxious feeling of just being stuck in traffic during a day that he's supposed to be working. And there's just such a dread that comes with it. You're just like in this weird vacuum in a place that you don't want to be, in a place that's not, now you're out of your own control and time is moving on around you and you should be a part of it, but you're not. And that's what I got out of this is that, you are in this vacuum. There is nothing you can do. The odds are against you. And now, you are seeing life passing you, through you. And that, we all do the thing where we look over at people and we kind of wonder what their life is like. And I think King takes that sentiment as he talks about in the preface. And he's like, well, what if you saw the worst thing possible? And I think he gets a little sort of Canterbury-esque moral punchline at the end of like, well,
he explains the story a little bit too much at the end.
Yeah, and I think that's a little that hamstrings a little bit, but I like the model of it and I like what it's trying to say, and I think it's very approachable and timeless for a lot of constant readers. I'm sure in 10, 15 years it'll still apply. Unless we have flying buses and we can get anywhere. But
an Astro bus.
Yeah, an Astro bus.
There's like a Seinfeld finale feel to this too, with like the Good Samaritan law. But this is one that you're talking about interludes or the introductions. I actually enjoyed him talking about being in Paris and being inspired to write this more so than the actual story.
That was for 11/22/63, that tour, right? So November 2011, that had to have been, I feel like.
Right?
Man, yeah.
Jen, you had this at number 5, so also enjoyed it, but in the very upper echelon for you. Yeah. Share your thoughts.
Okay, so and it is interesting. I thought about the 5th step. When I was reading the 5th step, I immediately thought of this story too, because one of my favorite things when I'm reading a King short story is when he pulls me into a world and then like knocks me out with a left hook that comes out of nowhere. I just fucking love that. I like that this is short and nasty, but I also think it's really in conversation with a lot of like the tones and the themes of this book, like with morality and afterlife and even obits too. It's like, what decisions do we make and what do we let go when we know we should do something about it, but we also have like these things don't happen in a bubble and we do have these other things that we have to think about. And I was just thinking like this guy is going to show up in that afterlife office and he's going to have to like think about this. If I live my life again, would I make the same decision? And I think this is the clearest encapsulation of that theme, which I think is kind of an overriding theme in the book. And I just really like it. I like this question. I like thinking, what would I do if I was in that situation too? And also there's like this feeling of like, sexualized violence, even though there's no sexual element, but it's a man attacking a woman too. And I think that that's something that I connect with. And I think, well, what would I do? And not to bring politics up again, but like, I thought about that around like 2016. I remember specifically thinking, that's not my fight. I'm not getting involved because putting my face into the politics of this is maybe going to cost me a little more than I'm comfortable with. And then after a lot of shit happening, I think that, we were all there for just really thinking, okay, well, I can't afford to let that kind of stuff go because then what kind of world are we living in? And I think this is the kind of story that I find really readable. It's really short and nasty, but it hints at so many deep themes that I really, really enjoy digging into. So that's, I think, this was one of the ones I was really looking forward to reading again, and it didn't disappoint.
I do feel like you enjoy the short ones with like a lot to chew on. I'm just
exactly.
I'm looking at everyone's list. I'm the master. I am the bizarre master. I know
what is your
Dan the bizarre master.
All right, so we're gonna stop there. I know the episode's been getting a little long. Those are the bottom half of the stories we're covering in the Bazaar of Bad Dreams. Next week we'll be covering the top 10. So make sure you come back for that. Stick around, as they say. And we'll be seeing you over long days and pleasant nights.
I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends.
You've made it to the end of another Bloody Disgusting podcast. Congratulations. If you like our programming, consider searching for other Bloody Disgusting podcasts, such as Creepy, Horror Queers, The Boo Crew, SCP Archives, Nightlight, Margaret's Garden, and more.